Survival mode is like a silent killer. That's a trauma response. Like, that's a survival trait. You might not even be consciously aware of why you're doing certain things.
This is Anna Wojtowicz, founder of the AW Creative, former Vogue, and Martha Stewart. She unpacks why survival mode is quietly capping your revenue.
You've been saying like one more quarter pushing through. You've been saying that for the last 5 years. When you can like untangle success from survival, your life completely changes.
Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of EJ Consortium, a finance consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. Today's guest built the kind of life most people put on a vision board. Legacy brands like Vogue and Martha Stewart on her resume, a multi-six-figure business, a dream apartment in Manhattan, and then she walked away from all of it. Anna Wojtowicz is a high-performance healer, intuitive channeler, and the founder of the AW Creative, where she helps ambitious women stop mistaking survival patterns for power. A first-generation Polish immigrant who traded Manhattan for the south of France, Anna's here to talk about what happens when you stop building your success on fumes and start building it on wholeness. Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, Anna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation today.
Yes, I have been very much looking forward to it. You have such a fascinating story, and I also find so many similarities with our guest when I'm doing research for the episodes, and it's just nice to find those commonalities across the board in places where you wouldn't expect to see them.
Absolutely.
So let's actually start our conversation today at the very beginning. So you
Mhm.
came to the US from Poland as a child. It was right after the fall of the Soviet Union, and your family was literally rebuilding everything from scratch. Can you talk about how that experience really wired you for ambition and what success meant in your household growing up?
I think my answer is very unconventional because when most people hear my upbringing, they're normally like, "Oh, so you like came here for a better life. You want your parents wanted you to have limitless possibilities." But that actually wasn't the case for me. Like for me, actually very little was expected of me, and that surprises people. And what most people don't understand that while there is that like immigrant story of limitless possibilities, there is also the other side of the coin of like when you've generationally lived in an environment where like safety and security was like that was not the basis, like that was just not
Right.
normal. So like my great grandma lived through World War I, my grandma World War II, my mom's, the introduction of the Soviet Union and communism, and then finally I was born, right? So like generationally, what I'm experiencing is very different than anybody in my lineage has ever experienced before.
Right.
So when we came over here, I think my parents' expectation was like, as long as we have like safety and stability, a home, and then my children, I'm also the eldest daughter. So that should tell you a lot
Me
as well.
too.
Yes, I'm also
Yeah.
the eldest daughter, two younger brothers. And I'm the only one that's like very different from everybody else because while, I think they were expecting their children to have, a home, a stable job, or like that to them was success because it was safety and stability that our generational lineage has never had before. But to me, that was not success. To me, that was like, well, I just felt like I came into this life like a bat out of hell, being like, yeah, but I want to like, yeah, but I have like all these thoughts and ideas, and I like want to move to New York, and I want to do this, and I want to travel the world. And while logically that sounds like successful, and logically that sounds like, yeah, obviously, you want your children to experience the most in the world, but to them, that idea and that lifestyle that I really wanted, that I just naturally felt drawn to, posed as a threat. So even though logically they were now in an environment that was safe and stable, their nervous system and their system was still wired for survival, right? So while yes, there was an external pressure on me, but then I also had like very little support, and that created a
Mm.
lot of hyper independence, a lot of hyper vigilance, a lot of just like
Yeah.
isolation of like I didn't have anybody to talk to or support me as I was growing up, and especially in high school, as you know, you're evolving and then thinking about colleges and things like that.
Mhm.
So for me, it was the opposite of like my survival mode and my ambition wasn't driven from people putting pressure on me. It was just internal pressure, but also like the pressure that I inherited just from like a lineage of generational trauma and lived in experiences. So then when I realized that I really wanted to go to New York and study school, for college. That became like World War III in my house because my mom was like, absolutely not. You're gonna like come home crying. You're gonna take out a ton of loans because we can't support you, and like it's just a bad idea overall. Like red flags, like to them, that was like the ultimate threat. And mind you, I was like driven and ambitious from the get-go. Like I came out being like, what's the plan? And, I was in all AP classes. I was a self-starter. So for me,
Mhm.
it kind of felt like I was being gaslit my entire life. To be quite honest, I was like, because I would completely understand if their side of the story was, well, you're kind of flaky, you don't follow through, like this is a bad idea. But I was none of that. I
Right.
was
That's
like,
nuts.
that had never been my personality. That wasn't me. I was like, type A, type A, type A, go, 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 go. Like, and even my guidance counselor, I grew up in a very small town in Florida. And even my guidance counselor, when I told her my plans, she was like, oh, honey, I think you need to dream a little smaller. And I was just like, I literally feel like I'm going crazy. I remember being 17 years old and be like, I'm going crazy. Like, I need to
Like
get out of
something
here.
is not matching up.
Not something is not matching up. And then shocker to everybody but me, I got in to school. And yeah, so I moved to New York all completely by myself. I knew I was gonna have to pay my own way. I did it. And so for me, and so like when I talk about survival mode, a lot of people think that means that like chaos is going on, right? Like
Mm.
either my business is failing or, things aren't going right. But like for me, my survival mode was this like my fuel source of my ambition when I was born started out very, I don't want to say pure, but it was very just like this life force of like,
Mhm.
energy and like
Yeah.
to like, you just have this like hunger and drive that's so like clean because it's just like purely you. It's so authentically
Yeah.
you. And then as you have these like life experience, and then like generational trauma comes in and external pressure and just like life and the world, is impacted onto you, then all of a sudden that gets muddied, right? And you don't even realize it's getting muddied because it's not very evident a lot of the time. So when I was doing, when I was really like unraveling myself and really like healing my survival mode, what I came to conclusion is like my biggest fuel source of my ambition was no longer clean and authentic. It was actually really driven by resentment and anger and like just like feeling like, well, you never believed in me, so now I have something to prove. And
Right.
I'll be honest, that got me really far in life. That kind of
You know, it
that
can take
that
you a long
it
way,
it
you
can take
know?
yeah, it definitely, I mean, it taught me, places like, Martha Stewart, Teen Vogue. I even worked at the Smithsonian Magazine for a while, built me a multi six-figure business, got me my dream apartment, on the Upper East Side by Central Park. Until it didn't. Until it literally started backfiring me because that sort of
Yeah.
fuel source is not sustainable. And so once I kind of had that epiphany and I had to be really honest with myself of like, I'm not an angry person. Like, I'm not an angry person. I
Yeah.
don't spiral. I don't have these big outbursts. But if I'm being completely honest, and this work like really needs you to be actually really honest with yourself, is that yeah, if I look back, a couple of the decisions that I made or the goals I had, even though I actually did really want them, but my intention and my driver behind them, if I'm being honest, was fueled by that. Well, I'll show them.
Mhm.
Once I do this, I'll feel better. And that's why survival mode is like a silent killer because you might not even be consciously aware of why you're doing certain things. And then when you don't hit goals or when you end up in like situations where you're like, this strategy just like is literally sucking like the daylights out of me. And then you're just like, what did I do wrong? Right. And then it's like you try to overcompensate by adding more strategy or like inputting like more funnels or more tools when actually like it's you.
Right.
Then the solution becomes, okay, we have to start working on you and no longer the business, but the business will be a byproduct of the work that we do on healing your survival mode. So that that was like my biggest aha moment of like, yeah, I don't think this is something that like can be just like fixed with like adding more strategy or even like doing like having the perfect routine or just
Right.
going to therapy. It was really like I have to fundamentally rewire my internal operating system. And that's when I realized that like there is no other option but that if I
Yeah.
actually want a sustainable fuel source for the rest of my life, because this is just no longer working. Like this is officially like dried out. I'm operating on zero. The car's not moving anymore.
So tell me more about that moment because you just dropped so many gems about the intergenerational
Mhm.
aspects of our nervous systems and how they can still be hung up
Yeah.
on something from the past. And so the nervous system that we are operating in doesn't really serve us well in this moment, but unless you do that intentional work of reprogramming it. So how did this all kind of come to a head where like what was the catalyst that really made you think this is
Yeah. This is
not
a no-go.
yes.
Like, this is a no-go. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was a really hard decision. And I mean, it wasn't one thing, it was many things, but I noticed that the summer of like 2022, things started feeling a little weird for me. Like we're high achievers, we're hard workers, and especially as business owners, we just naturally are doing something that's really hard. Like there's no way
Right.
of getting around that. Like what we do is hard. But there's a difference between doing something that fundamentally is challenging and hard, and then you get to like to this moment where you're like, yeah, I understand this is meant to be hard and challenging, but this feels a little oddly hard. Like something isn't right here, right? Like something's telling you that like, yeah, but this feels like a weird hard. We all
Yeah.
have those moments of like something's not right here. And so that was summer of 2022. And then by the end of the year, I started getting serious about doing like exploring this type of work. And then March 7th, which is coming up, is when my dog Coco suddenly passed. And it was the first time in my life I've ever experienced grief, but also he was my first dog. And I just had this moment where I was like sitting at my desk and I like physically couldn't like log on to my computer, like meaning like I felt paralyzed. And in that moment I was like, why can't I push through this? Like what's wrong with me? Like why have all of a sudden like because I was always the person that I was like, it doesn't matter what you're going through, you need to push past it, right? Like we've got shit to do. You need to put everything to the side. Like that's all I knew growing up. I saw my mom do it. I saw my grandma do it, right? Like as a survival tool. And then in today's society, that kind of like, well, I just need to push through it is what constitutes a high achiever, somebody who's really ambitious, somebody who's a really good CEO or leader. But the fact is, like, that's a trauma response. Like, that's a
It
survival trait. And I
yes.
just remember being like at my computer, feeling so much shame and guilt that for the first time in my life, I couldn't push past what was going on. And that in itself was kind of like a mind bender. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm clearly grieving. So I gave myself like 2 more weeks. And then as time just kept on going by, I was like, I still don't feel myself. And at this point, I don't even think it's grief. At this point, I think it's something a lot deeper. And at that point, my nervous system just completely shut down. It was like my mind, body, and soul was like, what you can't keep you actually we're not even going to let you go at like 5% anymore. Like you're just going to keep being in functional freeze until you realize that this is no longer something that you can do anymore. And at
I'm
that
glad you named that as functional freeze. Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of listeners probably have not heard that term, but I've actually heard someone recently describe the exact thing that you are
Yeah.
describing, and I've been there myself. I think it's a lot more common in high achieving women than we realize that they keep going and they keep going until the tools that have served them their entire lives no longer serve them and they are stuck and it's paralyzing and it is very disorienting.
Yeah, because you're like, this is not me, this is not my identity. Because when your identity for your whole life is like,
Mm,
I'm ambitious and I'm driven and I get shit done and I'm a self-starter and I'm like a mom and a wife and a partner, like I hold everything together. And when all of a sudden like the floor completely opens and like from under you and all of a sudden you're like, what is going on? That creates a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and that functional freeze of like, oh my God, what do I do now? And for me, truly felt like I was free falling. Like I no longer had anything to hold on to. And I physically felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. It was
yeah.
so uncomfortable. But
People don't talk about that, like how
yeah,
intense these feelings are. So, like when we talk about, you read functional freeze or you hear about depression, like you don't hear a lot of conversations where people talk
mm-mm.
about the physical ramifications and like the psychosomatic things that are actually happening in your body, because it can be very intense and it's
Oh,
terrifying
a
if you
thousand.
don't know
Oh,
what's going on.
exactly. And so because you don't have verbiage or language, which is like what I really try to invoke of like, I'm here to put words that you may not like you have a feeling for, but you can't verbalize yet just because you've never been introduced to certain language.
Yeah.
And so like with when I'm working with clients, they're like, I don't understand why all of a sudden I'm having panic attacks. I don't understand why I'm waking up and like my chest has so much pressure or
Right.
right like or all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like I just feel this need to like I'm constantly gagging like I can't
Mhm.
breathe like all these like physical side effects but they're and then they're like but I'm not this person because I'm the person that always is able to push past it but the but that's your body giving you a signal that something is not right right and especially when you've been taught that, like, something that I had to retrain myself around, and I think is like literally the worst advice, especially when you've created success in survival mode, is like feelings aren't facts. And
Mm.
while yes, feelings are not facts, they are signals. And
Yes.
whether you like it or not, you are a human. And so therefore you naturally have emotions, but when you've been taught to suppress them, especially if if you've like started your business or started your career like I did, and now you're like, a founder and a CEO, you're just like, well, I just have to keep suppressing. I have to keep suppressing. And like that's where the crash out is going to eventually happen because you can only suppress so long until your body physically is like, time out. We ain't doing this no more. So
Right.
for me, it was like the months leading up to it of like knowing something isn't right and feeling very like numb, anxious, and it just felt like everything is working well. So why why aren't my feelings matching what I physically see? Right? Everything around me is going well, and yet I feel like something is wrong. Once again, like what is wrong with me? Oh, I'll just suppress it and push past it.
Mhm.
And so then when Coco passed, that was I just physically couldn't operate anymore. And it also made me realize I just like no longer liked what I was doing, which also was a complete identity like failure of like, oh my God, but I've worked 15 years for this. And now all of a sudden, like, I don't want to do this anymore. What's wrong with me? Right. Because my identity was tied to it.
So
And so,
disorienting.
yeah. So literally, I just felt like everything around me was falling apart. And so at that point, I was no longer grieving. I mean, not that I was no longer grieving, but I was not just only grieving
Right.
Coco.
There was
I
something
was
else.
I was also grieving myself and
Mm.
the life that I had built up until that part because I knew there was no going back. Because like literally what was I going back to? More functional phrase, more getting up in the morning and like dreading what I'm doing. And at that point, it was very I kind of felt like if you've ever been in a really like toxic job environment or like in a really healthy
Mhm.
relationship and you have that moment of clarity where you're like, I know what I need to do and I need to leave, but I know this is going to be really painful. Like
Yeah.
what's awaiting for me is like a lot of
Yes.
it kind of felt like that where I had this like very calm moment of like I know I'm in total chaos and disarray and yet I had this very calm knowing of like, and yet I know leaving it and figuring out whatever the hell is on the other side is the only option. And I think sometimes you have to get to that point where like your mind, your body, and the universe all conspire for you, even though it looks like against you. So at that point, you're like, okay, at this point, I have to surrender and just kind of trust that like whatever is waiting for me on the other side has to be better than this because I can't stay in purgatory forever. That just doesn't make
Right.
logical sense.
Not an option.
It's not an option. So yeah.
So, this point, you made a pretty radical decision that a lot of founders would never make, and you decided that you were going to take a full year sabbatical from
Mhm.
your business. So, what was you've kind of talked about kind of what led to that. How did you land on the idea that a sabbatical was what your body and your nervous system really needed at that time to be able to figure out what was next?
So I didn't intend for it to be a year. It just kind of ended up being a year, if I'm being quite honest. Because at the start, if I would have said a year, my body would have completely freaked out. I was like, year, a
Yeah.
year, I can't do that. So, and that's part of it. Is like when I'm doing this work with clients, it's like we don't focus on the end. Literally focus of like micro moments to reshape at a time
Oh,
because that's all of like your entire life is like kind of like you've gone here through death through a thousand paper cuts, right? A
hmm.
thousand different moments that have shaped you. So in order to like recalibrate your nervous system, your subconscious, your identity, it's also going to take like a million micro moments to do that as well. And
Right.
just like by doing that, that already shows your nervous system and your mind that you can take it moment by moment and you are safe and that nothing is wrong. So that in itself is nervous system regulation. But I I had to go on a sabbatical because like I truly was just paralyzed. Like I physically couldn't operate. Like I was so down bad that like at a certain point, if I could even like brush my teeth, that was like A plus for me for the day. I got a gold sticker.
Right.
Right. And so it just became like I have to almost go back to the basics and start just like learning how to like live life one day at a time. And it was incredibly that was hard. That was hard to be like I went from being somebody who's so successful and so ambitious and so driven that now I like need to like reteach my body how to do ordinary tasks.
Yeah.
That grief within itself was a lot of like de-shaming and de-guilting and unwinding my success from survival mode I had to do. That like one has nothing to do with the other. You could like when I was going through that, it didn't mean I was all of a sudden less ambitious and less
Right.
driven. I was just going through a season in my life where I had other priorities.
Right.
Right. So a lot of the times people are like, well, you know, I don't want to slow down or I don't want to do things that are not goal driven because that means I've gotten less ambitious. I'm like, that just actually has nothing to do with one another. Like
Right.
you are a human being, and if you want to live a full life, meaning that it's you have different areas of your life that you aspire to and want to put effort in just because you want to take a year or even a couple months to focus on something other than your business and not hit these insane quarterly goals doesn't mean anything. Like your ambition is not directly tied to your identity and like different parts of you. It's just a part of you, right?
And I
So
think that's so important to like pause there and make sure that people take that away because an important part of the work you were doing was recalibrating your entire identity. And I think
Mhm.
as high achievers, and you talked about this a little while ago, that when you spend 15 years building towards something and you've tied your entire identity up into it, it takes a while for your body to realize that is not who I am. That was a part of what I do.
Yeah, and so, like, logically, it made sense. Logically, I was like, "Okay, I've outgrown this work. This no longer feels good to me." Logically, that makes sense, right?
Emotionally,
Intellectually, but emotionally, and this is where a lot of, especially women, they're like, "Well, I know something, but, like, I know something and then I can't actually, like, do anything about it. Why is that?" Right? Because
hmm.
there's this, like, mind, body, soul, like, discoherence, where
Right.
just because, like, you know something doesn't mean, like, your behavior is gonna, you know,
Yes.
do anything. So, especially if you're like an intellectualizer, which we like all high
Yeah.
achieving women are, right? Like you can tell me everything about your habits and your traits and your trauma responses, but then you but
Yes.
then you actually don't have the tools to do anything about it, right?
Yeah.
Versus in my work, I don't just give you more theory, like we actually do embodiment work to actually give you tools to rewire so then you become self-sufficient in your own power, not conditional in your power. So so when I was like going through this, I was like, okay, I'm gonna I didn't even know what I was gonna end up doing on the other side. Like what I'm doing now and my mission
Yeah.
and my purpose, like I just had a knowing that it would like reveal itself. So I went into it being like, I'm gonna do what I need to do. I'm gonna do my I'm gonna work on my nervous system. I'm gonna my subconscious belief. I had like a spiritual awakening that we can talk about, but I'm fully gonna recalibrate my entire operating system, mind, body, and soul, and trust that like I have to find something on the other side that is
Yeah.
like truly my purpose and not just something that I'm just here doing because it like feeds my ego and my trauma responses. Like
Yes.
it just, that's I physically can't do that anymore. Like I
Yeah.
have to have more and it has to feel good. And I refuse to believe that's not gonna produce profit. Like I refuse to believe
Yeah.
that. And I was proven right.
Yes. And so speaking of that, when you came out of the sabbatical, you had a framework that you
Yeah.
developed. And originally it was purpose, peace, profit. And then
Yeah.
you recently redid it. And so it's now the ambition rooted in wholeness methodology,
Mhm.
release, revive, root. So tell us about that evolution and about this framework.
Release, Revive, and Root is a three-part pillar system that shifts your ambition from operating in survival to like actually trusted self-led power. So in order to, like we were talking about that discoherence with your
Hmm.
mind, body, and soul, especially for intellectualizers, in order to actively make sustainable changes in your habits, in your beliefs, that not just last a launch cycle, a quarter, a year, but actually fundamentally change the way you behave and decision make for like long periods of time. I'm talking 5, 10, 15 years. Three things need to happen. One, you need to be able to have nervous system capacity, right? So
Hmm.
actually, like your body needs to be able to handle the life that you're building, not just survive and manage the life that you are building. And so that not only comes through nervous system regulation, but it comes through releasing the trauma survival patterns that we've all created, success and survival mode, right? Like the proving, the pushing, all that subconscious underwiring that we're not even aware of, which I work with my clients to pinpoint that. And then number two is in order to fundamentally change the way you're operating, you also need a deeper level of self-trust that goes beyond what does logistically make sense? What can I brace for? What
Hmm.
can I prepare for? I need to be 10 steps ahead and have 10 different, contingency plans. So we're reviving your self-trust, but also like your connection to your intuition and your just like connection to a higher power, whatever that is. It could be God, the universe. It could just be yourself. It could be your spirit guides, whatever it is. But like, this is really is like dismantling hyper independence and hyper vigilance of like, it has to be on me because if it's not on me, then it's not. If physically, life will not support me if I'm not 100% in control. So when your baseline changes from like that proving and that bracing and that hypervigilance, all of a sudden now you have a new baseline that you can start creating from. And that baseline is all of a sudden your nervous system is regulated. And then your intuition and your self trust is tied with the way you make decision making. So all of a sudden you have this foundation that literally is like roots in the ground, right? It's no longer a tree you planted like 2 years ago. Like we're talking like magnolia tree roots, right? And that
Hmm.
becomes unshakable. So from those two, then we go into rooting. And right, we root in embodied strategy and structure. So this isn't me saying get rid of strategy, just lead with your intuition. No, like if we're operating out of wholeness, it means we're operating from all of our intelligence, meaning not just 25% of our intelligence, that is the logic, the strategy, intellectualizing, the overachieving, but also like the intelligence of your body, being attuned with your nervous system and knowing how to actually know the signals your body is sending you instead of overriding them and truly self-abandoning yourself and your
Yeah.
needs. And then also it's the intelligence of your own inner knowing, of that inner voice of your gut that actually truly knows what's meant for you, even though it may not look logical on paper, right? So when you have those three components of like releasing the trauma driver and rooting into a regulated nervous system, reviving your self-trust on a deeper level that's intuitive and truly like your own like decision-making power of your own voice. And then you have this embodied structure and strategy to know actually how to move through day-to-day life in a way that like is still strategic, it's still logical, but now it encompasses the other intelligence that is naturally inside of your body. That's like your whole entire life changes because all of a sudden you're making decisions and living life from all of you and that clean ambition that I was talking about earlier, right? That before it got muddied. And that completely changes every part of your life. And that naturally becomes a byproduct of why my client's business changes because all of a sudden you're making different decisions. You're showing up differently. You're having different relationships with your clients, the way you structure your offers, the way you price.
Right.
I mean, my clients even say that like their marriages get better, right? Like their
Mm.
relationship with their parents or their friends get better because ultimately you are the through line in your life,
Right.
right? So like if you start showing up differently in all of those micro areas of your life, well then naturally your life is going to change and evolve and it's going to start truly being a true representation of like what you actually want your life to look like and feel like.
I love this idea of clean ambition that has been kind of interwoven through our conversation today, that you keep coming back to that, that what your ambition and your true identity and true motivations look like before before the trauma, before the dysregulation, before the external factors, and being able to get back to that is so powerful.
Yeah, and it sounds really easy. I'd be like, okay, let me
Oh,
like, yes,
until you've done it.
yeah, it sounds really easy, but like, and just like as an example, I have this like one client that she's a CEO and founder of a really successful like brand and creative direction studio. And we were recently talking about, she's like, oh, I just keep feeling like my revenue year over year gets capped. And like, I'm constantly like restructuring and like, like revising my offers. And I was like, the simplest like solution here is to actually raise your prices because you haven't done that in a couple years. And like it actually, for all the investments you've made into the business, it actually makes sense for you to raise your prices. And instantly she was like, well, I can't do that because, and enter the reasons why. Enter the reasons why
Mhm.
you can't raise your prices, right? Like, well, I have to bring home a certain amount of money and like this and that. And I was like, okay, but is that just an excuse because you're uncomfortable raising your prices?
Hmm.
Right? Because like if you actually like have you the number that you ideally want to say, have you actually ever said that number out loud to a client?
Hmm.
And she's like, if I'm being honest, as soon as you said that, like my stomach tensed, right? And so like a lot of the times we use boundaries and these like excuses of like, well, I have bills to pay. Yeah, so does everybody else.
Right.
Yeah, like okay. Okay, yeah, so does everybody else. Does that mean like
Like, what do these things have to do with each other?
yeah, yeah. So it sounds really simple. Oh, raise your prices. Okay, but what if your nervous system physically can't handle saying that number out loud,
Right.
right? And you're trying to like avoid actually doing that work by like being, well, I'll just do my packages 5 times over, or maybe I just need to like work with other people. When actually
Mhm.
the simplicity, like the path to least resistance is raising your prices, but in order to do that, maybe there's some nervous system work that we need to do first for you to be able to, because ultimately, like she's not going to feel truly like fulfilled and that she's on like the caliber of the level she wants to until she does that. And so
Yeah.
then all these kind of like micro band-aid solutions are not actually solutions. And then
Right.
that just keeps you in a loop.
They're just ways to avoid doing the hard thing that you've told yourself that you cannot do.
Mhm. Yeah.
I have this conversation with clients all the time as well, especially the part you said about, have you said it out loud? Because I don't think we all realize there's power in when we write things down that uses one mind brain connection.
Hmm.
But when you say things out loud, those are different neural pathways that you are developing and different beliefs that you are actually building. And so when we actually avoid saying things out loud, we avoid thinking them, we avoid writing them, that actually has an impact on what we are able to do.
Oh, 1,000%. And it's actually really big for of like nervous system work is like
Right.
doing like so part of one like modality of nervous system work I really focus on is inner child work and physically like speaking out loud the things that you are feeling, because that in itself,
Mm,
like your body does focus on the way you talk, even if it's not talking to yourself, just physically the way you speak and the tone of voice, your body like responds to that. So, something I have my clients do often, I ask is like, where do you often feel like the most tension or the most pressure, right? So for me, I hold all of my anxiety in my stomach, but for some of my clients, it's like in their chest. So, like when they're, having like the spiral moment or they feel really triggered by something, or all of a sudden they feel anxiety, I'm like, okay, put your hands like wherever you feel that pressure or, in your body. And then I want you to physically like talk to you as if you were talking to like a child, right? So a client of mine, like yesterday, she ended up not getting this really big opportunity that she was hoping she was going to get. And I was like, okay, well, would you talk to yourself with compassion and kind of like lead yourself through, like would you talk to yourself with compassion, or would you talk to your son like, well,
mhm,
that sucks, what are you going to do, push past it? Like,
right.
no, you would probably give your son like a juice box and be like, let me give you a hug, let me tell you that like you're still capable, let me like,
Mhm.
and like you would talk to yourself in a way that's different than you would talk to that inner critic. And it may even sound silly, but I swear every single client that actually does this exercise is like, my anxiety, like all of a sudden within a couple minutes started like disintegrating. I'm like, yeah, because you're actually giving your body what it needs. And sometimes what your body needs is compassion, or it just needs validation that you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, the more we can do that, and the more we can start that quiets our inner critic, and then that slowly starts with like rewiring our nervous system and rewiring our subconscious. And then all of a sudden, when you like get triggered again, it's all of a sudden like an 8 out of 10. It's no longer a 10 out of 10. And then slowly but surely, those micro moments start building, and the scaffolding and the structure start becoming bigger and bigger. Before you know it, you've completely like rewired a whole belief. So
Mhm.
that's why I say like there's a difference between just like intellectualizing theories and ideas and actually having the tools to do something about it, which
That
I'm
is
all about.
so true. Oh, I feel like we could spend an entire podcast just getting into these conversations. And I'm just thinking, as you're sharing all of this, thinking of the powerful women that I know in my life and how these experiences happen time and time and time again. And I'm hoping that this conversation that we're having really gives voice to some of this and really helps some people drop some of the shame and guilt that they may have been struggling with and understand that these are biological realities. These are not
Yeah.
personal failings.
Yeah, like I said, the my life completely changed, and I see it in so many of my clients. When you can like untangle success from survival,
Mm,
your life completely changes, because all of a
right.
sudden, like if you actually think about it, what is the thing that is causing you most anxiety in your business right now? I can guarantee you, whatever it is, it's pressure, it's proving, it's some kind of emotion that you inherently are putting onto yourself, right? I don't care if
Yeah.
it's revenue, I don't care what kind of KPI it is. It all, I can guarantee you, it all comes back to some kind of emotion you're experiencing right now. And when you can like untangle that shame from ambition and being like, oh, but what does this say about me? What will, like, not even what will people think, but like, what will I think of myself? You're,
Right.
you're liberating yourself. You're liberating yourself from like this like mental prison that you don't even know you've been in your entire life. And that has been like
Yeah.
completely freeing of knowing like these things have nothing to do with me, and I no longer have to feel, and it means nothing, and it means nothing, and then I can just keep doing what I want to do, and like my life not only looks good, but it also feels good, and it's producing profit, and like
Yes.
I'm like serving a purpose. Isn't that like what we actually want to create like for our lives, instead of just like
Yeah.
not just like, oh, gotta survive another quarter? What are you pushing through? Because like
Such an important question.
let's be honest, you've been saying like one more quarter of pushing through. You've been saying that for the last 5 years. Like, let's be
Right.
honest,
Yeah.
right? It's And so like at what point are things going to start changing? So like my clients have just come to this firm. realization of like something does have to change. And I don't may not know what that looks like, but I'm willing to give it a try because I refuse to live like this anymore, right? I refuse to like have my like partner or my kids or my coworkers or myself live this life that just, if I'm being honest, may look good and nothing may be wrong on the outside, but I don't feel good, and that's not good enough
Yeah.
for me.
Serving you well.
Yeah.
So now at this point, you have come up with this framework and you've now helped over 100 women scale, to multiple six-figure brands.
Hmm.
You're running your own business from the south of France. And so I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit and ask you, what is the financial or operational challenge that you're most excited to improve right now at the AW Creative?
Yeah, so one of my biggest streams of income used to be one-to-many product offerings. So like
Okay.
masterminds, group programs, things like that. And something that I realized is that like I no longer can create really anything that I 100% can't back back myself. Like meaning like if I don't actually feel 100% dedicated to something, I can't do it
Hmm.
anymore. I can't. And so when I think back to those programs I did, I love the women that were in those programs. I love the clients I had in those programs. But if I'm being completely honest, a lot of those programs were just like of like, well, they make sense because they scale well and they did
Mm,
financially like very well, right? So,
yeah.
and it's not that I'm no longer interested in doing like one-to-many product offerings. It's just I'm very intentional and very thoughtful of like I really just want to commit myself to doing things that are like I wholeheartedly am dedicated to putting my time and effort in. And that doesn't mean that
Mhm.
I'm not going to do it again, but like I want to make sure that the idea and the premise behind them is something that I'm genuinely excited about and doesn't just feel like some void in the marketplace that hasn't been filled.
Yeah.
And but when a lot of times business owners just think through that logical lens of like, well, this would make sense and this scales really well and makes money, so therefore I'm going to do it. And then they're like, oh, this like doesn't actually feel good. Yeah, because you never wanted to do it in the first place. It
Yeah.
just makes money well. Right. But you don't want to take the
Yeah.
time and the effort to actually like be like, you know what, maybe I need a little bit more time to like bake out this idea before just going full into it and then dreading doing it every single day. So I'm really like, it's uncomfortable, but it's also exciting to be like, okay, let's see what happens if I'm like 100% devoted to every aspect I'm fully putting
Mhm.
myself into nowadays.
As you were articulating that, it reminded me of hearing you talk about measuring success through KPIs that include values, not just revenue.
Yeah.
And it feels like that comes into play here. So, can you give us a concrete example of what that looks like in one of your quarterly reviews to have that conversation? Like, okay, yes, this is bringing in revenues, but is it the most values aligned right now? And if so, maybe, that's an indicator that I need to make a shift.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like my life has drastically changed for like the many reasons I've talked about, but really because like I actually live my values. So which is something I used to say, but if I look back, like I didn't because I don't actually think because my values were all like survival driven, right? And so number one is like my values could not be your values, and that's okay, right? But number one is like, what are your values? Like actually, like being truthfully like honest, or what would you even like them to be if your nervous system was in a better place, if your intuition was fully developed, right? Like what would you aspire your values to be so we can work towards them? But for just like based on my framework, like outside of like revenue KPIs and like growth measuring tactics and stuff like that, like the other three that I really look at is like regulation, intuition, and alignment. So if you're like the CEO or the founder, it's like, okay, you have hit or maybe you haven't hit your goals. And even if you have hit your goals, you feel like you've hit your goals while feeling that you've done it from a place of like you actually had like capacity bandwidth within your own body. Like, how has your body felt through the last 90 days, right? Have you made decisions from clarity, from a place of like knowingness, regardless of the chaos that's been around you, right? Because there's always going to be some kind of chaos around you, right? Family, work. But even then, it's like, have you been able to remove your like ego and your like fear and scarcity
Right.
from like and panic and pressure from like, no, even in the midst of all this chaos, I still clearly understand what is the right decision for me, right? So how has your body felt from the last 90 days? And maybe we need to adjust something there. And like the same if you like didn't hit your goals. Well, how does that go back to like regulation? And so oftentimes when I talk about like calmness or clarity, that doesn't mean your life is like a kumbaya moment. Let me
Right.
be very clear. That's never going to happen. Once again, we are fundamentally doing something that's really hard while living a very full life, right? Full of family and kids and friends and dogs and, traveling. But there's a difference between like being delusional and thinking like you're going to get to this place where everything is going to be like calm and clear and kumbaya and being like, despite the chaos, I still can be like very focused and very clear on what my body needs and how to give that to myself. And that creates that self trust and inner knowing of like, I'm good. I'm no longer surviving through a quarter. I really feel like I have me. And like, that is giving my body immense amount of comfort and support as I'm navigating like this,
Yeah.
expansion or season of life for my business. So that's like one KPI. The other one is like goes back to like intuitive decision making, right? It's like how would you say you're trusting yourself in the decisions you made in this quarter? Do you feel like your decisions, have been led with curiosity and kind of this like, let's see what happens, let me test? Like, because if I've noticed that like the more you scale and the more you evolve, your curiosity tends to go down because then risk goes up, right? So, which in itself is like a survival pattern. Have you been able to like test? Have you been able to be curious, or have you really been like overcritical? Have you been like focusing too much on like the spreadsheets and the data without ever actually stopping to ask, like, is this something that like actually makes sense for you? Because like it could be a good decision for the business, but it could be a very poor decision for you,
Yeah.
right? Because like I had a client where she runs a seven-figure business, and by all accounts her business was thriving, her team was thriving, like everything, but like daily panic attacks. Like her life wasn't, she was truly just surviving, like quarter to quarter, week by week. But she's like, okay, but I just need to like get through this. And once again, like what are we getting through? Another panic attack? Like what are we getting through? And so she had to make the decision that like while the business was doing really well, it no longer was working for her. So she actually had to like scale back her team. And that meant like changing some of her offers. And she's like, the business has never done better. But that was decisions that before she just physically didn't have the tools or the know-how, how to even
Right.
approach a conversation like that for herself and for the business. And then the third one is alignment, which kind of like encompasses all of that of like, are you are you actually satisfied? Not just like the business itself look good, but like are you actually satisfied with things are going?
Mhm.
And like being actually brutally honest with that. But when you have that new baseline that we talked about, when you have that like rooted new operating system baseline, you can make harder decisions that are right for you, but maybe a little bit more challenging and harder to go through because all of a sudden now you have this like really strong baseline and operating system that allows you to move through that with more ease and less friction. I find when like all of those parts are moving in the right direction, revenue as a byproduct just naturally shows up, and the other KPIs that are more like tangible and like logical and strategic like naturally all start clicking into place because you, the through line, are clicking into place. So there's no more of these like leaking of like this like energy leakage through your survival patterns that is like it feels like things are just falling apart or not operating as smoothly as you would like.
To follow up on that, you have said before that courage comes before innovation. And I feel like that
Hmm.
was a great example of that, where the client had to really get in touch with what served her well and make some decisions that from the outside looking in, um, may not have, she may not have had the courage to make before she got real
Hmm.
about what was serving her well.
Yeah.
So if a founder today is listening and she's kind of standing at her own crossroads and she hears herself in that conversation, she knows that something has to change, but she's just terrified of what she'll lose, which often the stories we tell ourselves about what we'll lose are not based in reality, but that's another
Yeah.
conversation. But what's the first step you tell her to take?
I mean, if I'm, I mean, I completely know, I completely relate because that's how I felt. I was like, oh my God, but I'm gonna lose everything I built the last 15 years, and how will I do? Like all the what ifs start mounting up,
Oh,
right? All the what ifs, but I have bills, but I have this. But if we're being honest, like the things that you're scared to lose, you've probably outgrown anyway,
hmm.
right? Like if we're being completely honest, the things that I was afraid of losing, like I've evolved past, I've outgrown, right? And at that point, it's like, what am I actually losing? But besides a loss to my own ego and identity, that once again, if I'm being honest, wasn't my real identity because it was just like
Right.
on overdrive with survival patterns, like
Yeah.
right. So like at a certain point, you have to like really make the decision that's really hard. But it's like, am I willing just to keep living the way I'm living and going and just hoping like one day things are going to change, or like am I strong enough to actually make the really hard choice and decide that like I'm worthy of something more, and that I may not know what that more is because I didn't know what that more is. But if you have the right person guiding you through it, which I had amazing people guiding me through it as well. It's like if I have the right person who's embodied, who's made it through the other side, then I trust my support team and I trust my own ability to get myself through this because I know I can get myself through this. And I have to
Mm.
believe that something better is waiting for me for the other side. And a really big part of like what I do is like I'm not here to actually give you answers. Like I can't fundamentally tell you what to do. Like only you actually know what's the best decision for you, but that right there is a skill set that I want to help you master of like even understanding what is right for you because what's right for you is not going to be right for me. But when you've like, been in this bubble of especially like corporate or business, like you're just like, well, logically, this is what industry leaders tell you to do. I'm like, yeah, okay, but like what's right for you in this
Yeah.
season of your life? Right. So it's like my main job is like, yes, to help, move you through survival mode into like harnessing, power that's self-trusted and whole and regulated. Through that, it's really giving you the tools and like the sovereignty and the autonomy to be like, once you have this, like you truly will be able to fully function as your own person despite
Yeah.
what is going on outside of you. And like that is like a liberation and a freedom that like you've truly never experienced before until you like start learning how to like make decisions that way. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I used to like live like that. What was wrong with me? So yeah, so it's like having those skill sets and having those tools, like that is what's gonna completely like change the way you physically operate in your business and in your life on a day-to-day basis for the rest of your
Yeah.
life.
I love that. And I think that leads me into my final question as we're wrapping up today. So, with that in mind, what does the next chapter of the AW Creative look like, and where are you taking this work?
I mean, I'm hoping to completely create a new paradigm of success where ambition is rooted in wholeness. So I truly, just like my beginnings, dismantle and recreate. So it's like this work has not only changed my life, but I've truly seen the changes it's made. Like I truly work with people who shift cultures, right? Because they are the through line in everything they are creating. And so the more I can bring that into every part for entrepreneurs, for corporations, like not only is your like bottom line going to increase, but also like the health and the wellness of everybody around you is going to be like that much more impacted and purposeful. So I'm really focusing on doing a lot of like talking workshops and just honestly taking my own advice and like following my own intuition and seeing like where that leads me. And I truly like am not making any decisions unless I fully feel like I'm in a position to fully back myself up with them because I no longer want to be participating something or putting something out into the world where I'm like I just have to do this because it hits a certain quota.
Yeah.
Like I physically can't operate like that anymore. And I trust that if I implement my methodology, that those pillars, those three pillars are going to like day by day, month by month, quarter by quarter, take me to where is best for me.
Yeah.
And that hasn't let me down so far.
Yes, I love that. So, for everyone listening, that was Anna Wojtowicz, founder of the AW Creative. reminding us that leading with purpose can lead to profit, but leading solely for profit will very rarely lead to purpose or peace. If you want to learn more about Anna's work, head to theawcreative.com, follow her at theawcreative on Instagram and TikTok, and check out her podcast, The Limitless Podcast. And if today's conversation hit home for you, share this episode with a fellow founder who might need to hear it. We'll drop all the links in the show notes. As always, if this conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got episodes dropping regularly with more visionary founders and change makers who are reshaping how business gets done, just like Anna. And if you found value in today's episode, leave us a rating and review. It helps other values-driven leaders find us. Until next time, keep leading with intention, scaling responsibly, and building businesses that matter. I'm Rachel Bernier Green, and this is the Purpose Profit Shift.